You can see it happen slowly. The gym membership expires. The business idea disappears. The conversations get shorter. And one day the man who used to talk about changing his life starts talking only about getting through the week. You notice it in small ways first. He stops bringing things up, stops making plans 6 months ahead, stops talking about moving, building, starting over, trying something bigger. He still goes to work, still pays the bills, still answers texts with all good. But something underneath him went quiet. Most people look at that man and think he became lazy. What they're actually looking at is disappointment that lasted too long. I'm Hank, and I think a lot of men understand this feeling better than they admit. Nobody talks about how dangerous repeated disappointment can become for a man, especially a man who really tried, because there's a version of failure people respect, the loud version. The entrepreneur who lost everything chasing a dream. The athlete who came up short. The guy who swings big and misses. People clap for that kind of failure because it still looks ambitious. But there's another kind that gets quieter every year. A man works hard for 10 years and still feels behind. He gets passed over twice at work. The marriage gets colder. The savings account grows slower than inflation. The house repairs keep coming. Somebody younger starts making twice his money talking into a microphone online. And eventually the math changed. Not mathematically, emotionally. He starts calculating effort differently. Starts wondering if trying actually changes anything anymore. That's not laziness. That's accumulated discouragement. Psychologists sometimes call this learned helplessness. Sounds academic, but the simple version is this. When enough effort leads nowhere, the brain slowly stops believing effort matters. Like pushing on a locked door for years, until eventually you stop checking if it's still locked. Maybe that's you. The strange part is, most men never announce this shift. They don't sit their friends down and say, "I think I lost belief in my future." They just quietly reduce themselves. I knew a guy years ago, I'll call him Dave. Good worker, reliable, smart enough to do more than he was doing. Used to stay after shifts talking about business ideas, real estate, maybe buying some equipment and starting his own thing. Then life hit him 3 or 4 times in a row. Divorce. Bad debt. His dad got sick. One business attempt failed fast. Another dragged out just long enough to hurt worse. After that, he changed. Not dramatically. That's the thing. He still showed up. Still joked around, still watched football on Sundays. But the future disappeared from the way he talked. Every sentence became about surviving the week. And once that happens to a man, people stop seeing exhaustion. They start seeing mediocrity. That's one of the cruelest parts. What makes this harder now is comparison never turns off anymore. A man used to compare himself to his town, maybe a few coworkers, maybe his brother-in-law if Thanksgiving got uncomfortable. Now he compares himself to the entire country before breakfast. Men his age buying lake houses, men younger than him retiring early, 25-year-olds online explaining discipline from rented apartments with fake watches and ring lights. Even when he knows half of it is fake, it still gets in his head, because deep down, every man keeps a private scoreboard. Nobody talks about this, but status matters to men more than most of them want to admit. Not because they're shallow, because status often feels tied to safety, respect, whether people listen when you speak, whether your family trusts you, whether you feel like you became somebody. So when a man feels himself falling behind year after year, something dangerous can happen. He stops expecting life to improve. And a man without expectation becomes very hard to motivate. Now here's where it gets interesting. Some men are actually tired, burned out, overworked, carrying responsibilities nobody sees. But some men are not tired. They're unconvinced. Big difference. A tired man still believes rest will help. An unconvinced man no longer believes effort matters. That's why motivational advice usually misses these guys completely. Wake up earlier. Push harder. Stay disciplined. That language only works for men who still believe the road leads somewhere. But when a man has spent 15 years watching hard work barely move the needle, discipline starts feeling less like hope and more like maintenance. That's the part younger people don't always understand. A lot of men over 35 are not asking, "Can I work hard?" They already know they can. The real question is whether hard work still changes the outcome enough to justify the emotional cost. Nobody grows up wanting a smaller life. That's important to understand. He didn't plan it this way. Most men at 20 imagine something bigger, more freedom, more confidence, more peace. They thought by 40, life would finally feel stable. Then adulthood turned out to be mostly maintenance, bills, repairs, work stress, health issues, quiet anxiety at 2 a.m. And somewhere along the line, survival replaced ambition. Most people see a man who stopped trying. What they're actually seeing is a man who got tired of getting his hopes up. That sentence sits deeper than people realize, because hope becomes dangerous when disappointment repeats enough times. I think that's why some men retreat into routines. Same diner, same weekends, same conversations, same life every year. Predictability hurts less than hope. And then there's the regret. Not dramatic regret, quiet regret. The kind that shows up driving home from work when a song from 15 years ago comes on. The kind that hits when you see someone your age who kept going and somehow made it through. A lot of men carry this private suspicion that they became smaller than they were supposed to become. Nobody says it out loud because men are taught to feel grateful for whatever they have left. But the feeling stays there anyway. Maybe it's you. Maybe you still do your job, pay your bills, show up for people. But internally, you stopped expecting anything meaningful to happen. That's a lonely feeling. Especially because the world rarely gives men language for emotional exhaustion unless it completely destroys them first. Here's the part that stays with me. He didn't stop dreaming because he got older. He stopped because too many attempts ended in silence. That changes a man slowly, not all at once. Quietly, one disappointment at a time. One postponed goal at a time. 1 year where effort and reward stopped matching. And eventually he stops reaching for bigger things because protecting himself starts feeling smarter than believing again. That's not weakness. That's what happens when hope goes unrewarded for too long. But I've also noticed something else. The men who come back from this rarely do it through motivation. They do it after one small piece of evidence convinces them effort still matters. 1 good year? one honest opportunity, one win that finally feels real. Because belief is fragile after 35, but it isn't always dead. So tell me in the comments, do you think men actually become lazy with age? Or do they slowly stop believing life will respond to their effort? And if you want more conversations like this, about the psychology of money, status, pressure, regret, and the things men usually keep to themselves, subscribe. That's what this channel is.